In this video, we're going to share how we are roasting our Colombian micro lot from El Zacatin. Welcome. My name is Patrick Rolfe and this is Coffee with April. For this video, we're going to take a closer look into how we're roasting here at April. So it's an interesting season where we are starting to roast a lot of new crop coffees. With new crop, I mean coffees that are harvested in the later part of 2020. So this specific coffee from El Zacatin in Colombia that we're going to talk about has been harvested basically in October of 2020, and it's now with us here in Copenhagen. It's a tiny 400 kilo lot, more or less, that we have all of it. It's an aerobic Pink Bourbon that has been processed with part of the mucilage still on it, basically referencing some sort of honey approach. Now this is important because knowing the kind of basic factors of the coffee is going to help us dictate how we want to be roasting this coffee. So let's start by kind of walk you through some of those basics. First of all, it's a very high elevation coffee. We're up 2,000 meters above sea level, which is really high even for Colombia. It is a Pink Bourbon, which basically means it's a Bourbon with a slight genetic mutation, not much more complicated than that. But the interesting thing here with the coffee then is that it's gone through an aerobic fermentation. And that tends to change the structure in the coffee, which tends to change also how we here at April are roasting coffees. Now, we should say for the sake of this video that historically, we've been struggling with Colombian coffees. And we've been struggling with it for a few different reasons. The main thing being that processing of coffee cherries seems to be quite of a challenge when it comes to getting a coffee that has a stable shelf life. Now, what do we mean with that? Well, often shelf life in a green coffee is linked directly to the moisture content and the moisture activity in a coffee. And in Colombia, more so than other regions, we see fluctuating qualities over time. So we have been reluctant to purchase Colombian coffees in the past. And whenever we do it in the case of this, where we buy a very small amount. Basically making sure that we can roast this coffee when it's peaking and tasting at its best before we see any kind of deviations in the quality of the coffee. Now, all of this is important to kind of factor in when it comes to it. Obviously, we see some amazing Colombian coffee. It's not that Colombian coffee can't taste really good. It surely can. It's the inconsistency in the green coffees that are the challenging. Now, with that, we have seen over the years here at April other challenges that we're linking to certain kind of ongoing characteristics of flavors in Colombian coffee, which often have this kind of nutty character, slightly earthy, with a bit of a green spice, green pepper quality to it, which we also tend not to like. Now, for this season, which is part of this video, part of the reason why we're doing this video, we asked ourselves, well, how much of this comes from the green coffee itself, and how much of this comes from the fact that April may not know how to roast Colombian coffee, which is a fair question. And we tend to ask ourselves this every time we're trying to kind of take in a new origin for us. Even though we have a history of roasting Colombian coffee, in the 2020 season we had very few of them, almost none. So it really for us is an opportunity to kind of have a second look at how do we approach this, does it make sense, and is it our fault that the coffee isn't tasting the way we want to? Now, a truth with moderation, of course, and we've been roasting coffee for quite some time, so we have a fairly good understanding of what we're aiming to do in terms of the taste we prefer to have in our coffee. Now, when it comes to this coffee, first of all, it's a great coffee to begin with, which is really important. We started with a coffee that is very complex. The specific coffee is very yellow in its character. We're talking a lot of yellow plum. We're talking a lot of peachy stone fruit notes in the coffee, which is the coffees we tend to like. So even if you have a bit of a innovative processing on it, it goes really clean and really fruity in the most positive kind of way. So that's interesting to begin with. The second thing is then, how do we make sure that this coffee works out the way we want to? Well, before roasting, we start by tasting those pre-samples over time consecutively and a lot to make sure that, okay, is this actually holding up? Then we have the coffee arrive and we go on to profiling. And what's interesting now is that we slightly updated the way that we roast Colombian coffees, also with having in mind that we may not have done this the way we should be doing it in the past. Now, not to promote anyone here, but having a software like Cropster really helps in this case, right? Because we can backtrack all of our Colombian profiles to make sure that we end up in a situation where we can see, okay, what are the commonalities we're doing here? Is there anything we're doing differently that we shouldn't be doing with these coffees? Now, for those of you that follow us already know this, but it's important to kind of stress again, we're working with one continuous batch size. That batch size in this case is 15 kilo on a 15 kilo Loring. We tend to always recommend being between 80 and 100% of the capacity of the roast machine to get the best results. This is important and this is interesting, especially on a roast system like a Loring, where your air fan speed is directly connected to your burner setting. Then these things make a massive difference, and changing in between batch sizes becomes a lot more complicated. Now, the drop-in temp of this coffee at 200, very stable, also something we do consistently for every single coffee. So what we do when we roast is trying to link or basically lock in as many different variables as possible, which allowing us to focus on just one or two things to adjust, which makes it a lot easier for us to track the progress. Keep in mind, this is always linked with a very specific in-between protocol that we make sure works every single time, which then ensures that we know roughly what temperatures we're working with moving into the roast. Now, moving on, the roast here, one of the things that we learned from our previous Colombian roasting is that, one, we've been roasting it a bit too light. Now, when I say too light, I'm not necessarily referencing color, even though color is obviously the determinant factor of this. I'm referencing it that we've been working with digital numbers, so being end temperature, time after crack, that are fairly similar to some of our other coffees. And basically what we're seeing now is that to achieve the same colors as we have on our other filter coffees, let's reference Ethiopian or Kenyan coffee, we need to actually push this a tiny bit longer after crack, and we need to work with slightly higher end temps than what we're used to make sure that this coffee is evenly roasted. Now, also to make sure to extend the roast time a tiny bit, giving this time a bit more time in the machine, we started with a slightly lower burner setting. So we drop it in at 200, we push it at 80 degrees, basically 80% burner, and we do that up until 110 degrees Celsius, where we're actually pushing more energy into it to make sure that we maintain that momentum, so up to 100% burner. And this is basically what we're pushing on the coffee all the way to crack. Crack on a new coffee is always an interesting thing. Coffees can behave very differently depending on what we're kind of up against here. So what we tend to do here on this coffee, seeing that we're going in with a fairly high crack rate of ice, is that we're actually taking the burner down to make sure that we have a controlled temperature progression. When I say controlled, I'm not referencing a visual aspect of a curve. I'm kind of beyond that when it comes to roasting. I'm saying that we have an estimated end temp in mind, and I want to reach that without basically having too much of a change of a temperature difference between crack and the later part of the roast. Now, this basically turns into a total roast time of 10 minutes, 49 seconds, with the time after crack of 1 minute and 12 seconds. That will be a development time ratio of 11.1% for those of you that care. And the end temp here will be 209.3. And the result of this coffee is quite interesting. And I would like to say it's probably the tastiest Colombian coffee April has ever had. We had some fancy stuff. We had some geishas and some other things ruling out in the past as well. But this actually comes out in a way that for us, we don't have a lot of these green pepper things. We don't have a lot of these earthy kind of qualities in terms of the taste. Now, again, it's a better green coffee than what we're used to, which is important to consider. Your roasts are never better than the green coffee you're using. But two, I like to believe that we're actually roasting this a bit better than what we have done in the past. The co-profile in itself is a very kind of juicy, well-balanced cup. Again, it's mainly driven of yellow flavor notes. We're talking yellow plum, stone fruit. It's very sweet all the way through, but not in a fermenty kind of red way, which sometimes can be a bit too much for your palate, more in a clean, refreshing way from start to finish. So overall, we're really excited to share this coffee with you. We think it's one of the best Colombian coffees we have had, and we're looking forward to hear your opinions on it now. As always, we're roasting our coffees both as filter and espresso, separating the two profiles. I'm sure we're going to be able to share an espresso profile with you later on as well. If you want to hear it, let us know. It's something we will keep in mind with this coffee and keep close track on is the progression of the green coffee over time. Will it be stable? We basically think we're going to be roasting this over the next, let's say, 2.5 to 3 months, and it's going to be really interesting to see if we can maintain quality all the way through or not. And we're going to make sure to update you with any changes in the curve that we might do over the time to kind of compensate for a change in green coffee. Now, with that said, if you have any thoughts, any questions, always write them down here. We're always really happy to answer them. We're really happy when you're subscribing as well. And yeah, have a good day and thank you for watching. We want to give a special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. It's because of you that we are able to continue to make these videos. And we want you all to feel free to always come with suggestions and ideas on the content that you want to see, because we are doing this for you and because of you. Thank you from all of us here at April.